Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is Cyrus, and in this video I want to talk about what could be the key principle, or one of the key principles, in understanding this convoluted mess of metaphysics, the afterlife, the other side, other dimensions, where we ultimately go when we kick the bucket. And took some realizations to get to this point. And this is a constantly evolving, expanding field without any cohesive center. There is not like an academic knowledge base in these areas. It's just scattered people like me here and there trying to figure things out, and it's probably been this way, of course, for millennia, just because people can't comprehend these things as even being real enough to be able to create a single core knowledge base. So it's very slow to think of new concepts and be able to put them out there. So I suppose I'll just jump into it then. The main kind of key concept here is, for lack of a better term, consciousness duplication. It's the ability to be in multiple places at once. We could call it consciousness multiplicity. And this is also a key to understanding a lot of the mysteries and a lot of the quirks and strange things that we hear about that's so difficult to comprehend. I think if you can start to comprehend this part of the puzzle, you may find a lot of these mysteries begin to click together much more easily. Okay, so before we go further, you are watching Afterlife Topics, where we cover these crazy topics. If you go down and hit that subscribe button, I really appreciate it. And also get involved, work with me personally by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/Afterlife Topics, or just donate it to PayPal, or contact me any other way. You can find all the information down below. Help keep this show running. I really appreciate it, to all you guys out there who have contributed to this, and I really appreciate being able to keep going with this work. Okay, so to continue, what do I mean when I talk about consciousness multiplicity, consciousness duplication? Well, in our world right now, in your life, you may only be aware of the idea that you have one life. This is your consciousness. This is your reality. It goes in one direction. It starts at birth and ends presumably at death. And that's the way reality operates. Going into a multidimensional framework actually turns all that upside down and really mixes things up and changes even the most fundamental ways that we view reality. But I don't think it's something that's incomprehensible if you kind of meditate and think about it. And the idea is, imagine if you could basically take what is making you you and then make a second version of you, maybe a third version, maybe a fourth version, maybe a fifth version. But it's all still you. And it's all linked together, even if each version of you may not be individually so aware of the other version, and yet there's a greater level, or a subconscious level, that is aware of all of these other versions. And that is the thing that's like the invisible thread that connects them together. You can call that like the higher self, if you want to call it that. So imagine for a second that you have a life here. Imagine if you can go off and make a second version of you, having a different life, doing something else that you want to do. And then when that other life is finished, maybe that life can come back into the life you have now, and then those two split off branching versions can just mingle back into each other again, right? And from what I can gather, this seems to be something that they can do on the other side in a kind of very natural way that is really difficult for us to wrap our minds around. Now it gets even more complex because we're going to toss into the bunch the concept of multiple parallel timelines, which I spoke about a few videos back, and I have an interview coming up with Joe Higgins, and that'll probably be the next video. It's a really interesting interview if you guys are into these topics, because we actually dive into this in particular, the concept of duplicate selves in parallel timelines, and as it relates directly to our experiences on the other side, and setting up particular lives this way. In this case, for the purpose of actually creating opportunities to live astral lives with loved ones when those opportunities were lost before. For example, a parent loses a child, and then being able to live a life still with that child from the age basically that they passed away. So to be able to pick up where you left off on that side, even though that child long ago grew up on the other side, or is somebody else entirely, or has evolved in many ways. Apparently it's very easy, according to Joe the medium, to create a new timeline and then a duplicate self, and then you can go spend time with that duplicate. So again, it's very complicated and difficult to figure this stuff out, but one way to look at it is everybody, every person you meet, they're not bound to just be in one part of space and time. And with parallel timelines, this is a subject that's been covered by a lot of kind of non-afterlife believers, but people in the philosophical, metaphysical side of things, and a lot of thinkers, philosophers, but it's the idea that there could be infinite versions of yourself if you consider multiple timelines, the multiverse theory and things like that. So every single time you make a choice, every time that there's an idea, then there's a parallel timeline where maybe you really did those things. So if you're thinking about taking a vacation to Mexico back when people used to take vacations in the old days, and then you decide not to do it, then there was still a parallel timeline created at that instant when you thought of the idea. So in that parallel timeline, there is now a different you that has gone on that trip and exists on that parallel timeline, even though you are not that person, even though this is a version of you that is seemingly disconnected from you. So where things get really wonky and difficult to fully figure out is the idea that on the other side, where again it can kind of look and feel and seem like this world, you're not in Kansas anymore. There's things that are very, very different about that side, and one of them appears to be just to what extent your consciousness ability can manipulate these elements, right? So in the sense that you want to go on a different timeline where you have X, Y, Z parameters, maybe just an afternoon of meditation, and then you will warp into that timeline, and you will no longer be in that astral frequency that you were before. You're now in an altered one where you're living the life that you wanted to live. In this case, let's say it's with a loved one who you didn't have the opportunity to do certain things with in this lifetime, and now you're doing it over there. Now, how about the concept that you could be living that life, and then that back on, like, if you want to call it the main timeline, the original timeline that you were on before, then there's still a version of you on that timeline as well, and then you can hop between those timelines. What about the idea that you may know somebody on that side and then know different versions of them? Okay, so let's say let's say you're there, you cross over, you meet up with your parent, who of course crossed over long before you did, and now they have a whole different kind of life and identity on that side. You can't really recognize them anymore. But what if you know multiple versions of them on multiple different timelines that you can hop around between? So you'll know, so that parent may decide to split off and create a new timeline with you, where now they are back at the age that, when you guys were both together in this world, and then you're doing certain things that you didn't have the opportunity to do here. Maybe, get a nice house by the beach, whatever it might be. And then you're living that timeline with that duplicate of your parent. And then there's still the other version of your parent that's off doing something else. And then you can go see that version, which is kind of like their higher self. And then any other timelines you want to explore with that person, and be living all these lives simultaneously, or being able to multidimensionally exist. So have a version of you doing this, a version of you doing that, a version of you doing this. And how do you comprehend having different lives going at the same time? I think this is where our comprehension fails. Then this is the cutoff point for us. This is where, with our limited brain, we can't arrive at that point or fully understand that. I just know that this seems to be what they talk about, what they report happening. Okay, so the next element of this I want to cover concerns a hypothesis that maybe we have many different timelines happening at once, and this may explain the crazy nature sometimes of dreams, because we may be wondering sometimes, where does all this input from all these different dreams come from? Because some of us, we have a lot of crazy dreams all the time. We're wondering, I dreamed I was in a life here and a life there and doing these crazy things, and I was a fighter pilot here, and I was an opera singer, and like a bunch of stuff that's very strange. And sometimes in those dreams, you'll notice you're still you, or I'm still Cyrus. And a dream is, of course, not the same as astral projection. A dream is just images, ideas, abstractions sometimes, but they still seem like they must be coming from a source somewhere. And what if the mystery behind dreaming and where all that information comes from is maybe you have many different timelines, parallel existences, duplicate versions of yourself all over the multiverse in different places, and just some of that information just leaks back into your mind somehow, because I think all of these different versions are still connected by your consciousness in a kind of invisible, threaded way. So this may explain all these weird memories that sometimes people get, because it does seem like, in a timeline like this one, there is an astral type of environment we go to. So if I astral project, I go into that astral condition. But that astral condition seems to be this timeline's astral condition. So then the question arises, is there this astral condition of every single parallel timeline? The answer, of course, would have to be yes. So if I astral project, I'm in what seems to be a consistent environment that's at least connected to this timeline. If I'm dreaming, I may be getting input from all types of different timelines, but then when you're really over there, when you finally cross over, you may have the ability to go to different astral timelines as per your whims and wishes. And you may be accompanied there with loved ones, with people from this world who are now the versions of them on that timeline. Now the question is, are they going to be the same people if they're on a different timeline? And by all accounts, it would seem like the answer to that question is yes. It's still the same person living a different life that's created on a different timeline. But it is that separate timeline that's distinguishing it from however you knew them before. And so they might have different experiences that have shaped their ideas and personalities, but they're still going to be the same person. You've just cut through the multiverse, and it's a different version of them. So again, what about the higher self? Is this possibly all of these different duplicates of a person, and when they all converge together, then there's a primary focal point? Maybe there may be one way to look at a higher self. And a higher self then, could be many different lives on the earth plane, parallel timelines, all this stuff, but it's the same consciousness that's split apart in all of these many different directions. And so when all those different consciousness splits come back together again, then that would be considered a higher self, which would have a lot of accumulated knowledge. And if the higher self has so much accumulated knowledge, that's why maybe our intuition, our subconscious, our ability to tap into that higher self is able to guide us with so much knowledge, because that higher self has a lot more experience than this singular timeline or earth plane branch off is necessarily having. So I know some of y'all might be, might be a little bit confused, or your head might hurt. That makes perfect sense to me if it does, because this is not an easy one to figure out necessarily, and I've been throwing ideas against the wall about this for a while, and I'm still not fully there yet. I think it does involve the mysteries of that side, going into the sort of the borderlands of what it is that we can really comprehend here in this world. But I do think there's more that we can comprehend here than they give us credit for. If you have an imagination, if you can kind of expand your mind and try to think about bigger concepts, it's possible to wrap your mind around these things, and if you just meditate on it for a while. But on a practical level, it does show a lot of possibilities for whatever your life may be on that side, right? So things that you want to do that you feel like you're missed out on here, or people you want to be with, and very specific things you want to do. The idea of creating a parallel timeline to match those needs. And how you do that, of course, I don't know. Maybe you need some kind of higher guidance to set something up like that. Maybe it's not just something that we can do automatically. It's hard to say. It's wacky stuff, but that's as much as I know for now. So, what's coming up next? Like I said, we'll have another interview coming up soon, and more videos. And yeah, I'm still here, back home in USA, and still month 4.5 of the virus still, I think, messing with my body. And I'm telling you, it's really stressful. I'm kind of just keeping things easy and keeping things mellow, focusing on health. And that's really what my main focus for a while. Hopefully making a lot of videos for you guys. And I guess that's about it. All right, well, thanks for watching this. Of course, you can get involved with the Facebook group Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics over at afterlifetopics.com. Pick up books like The Afterlife and Beyond. You can see the picture of the book on the bottom right side of the screen. Understanding Life After Death was my original book back from 2015. I think still pretty relevant today. And all that, yeah. Or you can, once again, work with me personally if you want to do that. Alright, this is Cyrus. Thank you for watching this confusing video. Let me know what you think down below in the comments, and I'll talk to you real soon.